welcome to New Game Plus. I'm Tim. I'm joined by Donald. How are you?
I continue to be neither Kirsty nor Jason or anyone else who has hosted the show in this awfully comfortable chair. Now see why they kind of like doing this thing.
And I continue to be the person sitting in this chair, sort of like
So
keeping
if
the
you
team
will,
together.
the carry of the team.
The carry, even though I play support. So
Dota jokes, kids.
yeah, we have to slip it in there like every episode, just one Dota reference.
Yeah, but we don't have to
Gets me
shoehorn them in though.
No, we don't. But something that's not Dota related, we do have more
Much
games.
to your chagrin.
yeah. You and I both played Ori and the Blind Forest.
Oh yes, like it is just a beautiful game of first impression. Whether it's any good or not, you'll find out in a little bit.
Yeah, and we've also got some serious business.
Yes, we
with
talked to Tim Wilson, our Human Rights Commissioner. We talked to him about freedom of speech and other assorted related topics.
Yeah, Gerard will definitely be asking a lot of questions, and like freedom of speech is a big thing in Australia because it's not like the American freedom of speech. So we get to find out more of that later.
It's an interesting take on the issue for sure.
Yes.
But of course, we also talk about Resident Evil Revelations 2. All the episodes have been out. You may have watched us as we play through on our New Game Plus Twitch stream. What's our final verdict though? You'll find out towards the end of this episode.
But first up, we'll review Ori and the Blind Forest.
Coming out of E3 last year, the game that really impressed me wasn't Call of Duty, it wasn't Bloodborne, but it was Ori and the Blind Forest. Even just from the trailer, it just looked absolutely beautiful. And it holds up, doesn't it, Tim?
Yeah, it was the game that we were expecting to be the new Braid, the new Limbo, and it certainly holds up with its visual style and its soundtrack as well.
Oh yeah, just this hues of purple and pink and blue. You don't really see that too much in games, and it just looks spectacular here. You can tell that each individual element in the game was handcrafted for that sequence and that sequence only.
Yes, and the story as well just really complements that sort of style with the light spirit coming off the tree, being adopted by a bear-like creature, and
then everything just going haywire. It is honestly one of the sadder opening sequences in games. It's almost as heart-wrenching as Up.
Yeah, very comparable. But there's certainly a game behind it as well, and a good one as well.
Definitely too. It's probably best compared to a Metroidvania sort of game, so you do have to explore around this environment, and you do power up to explore even more of the map. But it's also got elements of Super Meat Boy as well.
Yeah, like jumping off walls, and it's certainly a very difficult platformer, but not as bad as Super Meat Boy, but it is up there.
It's challenging for sure, but the controls do keep up, as in the game does empower you to pull off these very tricky, very difficult situations. But you do have to earn it and learn it, don't you, Tim? How many times have you died?
Hundreds and hundreds, and it reminds you on the main screen as well. So every time you look at it, but it's certainly very rewarding when you get to the end of a sequence and you've died so many times trying to get through that sequence, and when you finally get to the end, it's amazingly rewarding.
It is just fun just to traverse and jump around the environment, and overall, it just made Ori and the Blind Forest just an absolute joy to watch, to listen, to play through. It is just so cohesive as a package, and I enjoyed all of my time with it.
Now, LA Cops is a new game by Team 17 of Worms fame, and it's how do I say it delicately? It's basically if you took Hotline Miami's premise, like the top-down kind of borderline isometric shooter, and you added, say, a partner mechanic where you control two people at a time, so there's a little bit more strategy, and the idea is to complete objectives. So it's not quite as fast-paced as Hotline Miami. It's not that frantic breakneck, throw weapons, blah, blah, blah. But it's a lot more like breach and clear, but without the breaching and the clearing. So you set a partner up to have a look at the door, you go through it, you bring people back through, he shoots them or you arrest them, and basically it goes on like that. The color palette's really interesting. It's this really kind of pastel, kind of blanched style of art. And it works for the era that it's going for. It's going for that 70s, 80s kind of cop drama vibe, and it works. For that, it absolutely works. And you see the story progresses. You know, all the different cops go through their different trials and tribulations. But it's also about, I guess, realistically, it just serves as a simple framework for the gameplay itself. And the gameplay itself is pretty tight. Like, you start off, you really rush into it like you would like Hotline Miami. You run out, you run back, you run out. And you realize very soon that doesn't work. Even though you have more lives, you generally have more bullets, it doesn't work because you're going to die pretty quickly. But if you learn to set up your angles, walk through doors, set up ambushes, stuff like that, it's actually a real heap of fun and a really interesting twist on that mechanic. Must be, there has to be an audio cue for it. Like, it can't be completely invisible.
I think you can hear like some buzzing in the distance, like some locusts, some cicadas. But
oh man, I didn't realize Gerard was playing.
Spring Break! Wow, that was okay.
That was great.
Thumbs off.
That was great.
No mosquitoes around. Let's do this. Stop.
Your blood's gonna bed. I knew it was. The devil came, made you bad for good. So death is coming to purge this town. I know your name, and I'm gonna cut you down. You can all run if you want to. You can all hide if you need, but I'm gonna cut you down.
Welcome to episode 4 of Serious Business, where we're looking at internet issues that affect gamers. And today I'm here with Australian Human Rights Commissioner Tim Wilson to talk about online, Twitter, a little bit of gaming. Thank you for joining us, Tim.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Really, when we are talking getting offended and freedom of speech, where's the boundaries for that? Like in Australia, we don't have a freedom of speech as say the Americans do we? I mean,
we don't have a freedom of speech protection like Americans do. No, they have in their Bill of Rights provision where the Congress can't make a law basically infringing what people can say. That doesn't mean that it's complete carte blanche in the United States. What they do is they have laws that deal with the interaction between freedom of speech and when it amounts to violence, so incitement to violence. That's still considered justifiable because there's obviously an explicit harm done as a consequence of speech. And Australia doesn't have such provision, but we basically protect it in the same way. All speech is legal unless it is made explicitly illegal. And if you go around the country, when speech interacts with another sort of human right, or explicit harm, that's when we get to limits on it. So you can't incite violence. That's across state laws all across the country. There are federal provisions around urging violence on the basis of religion, political opinion or race. There are also different provisions around harassment, but it's not just in terms of law that we use to limit what people can say when it crosses the line of, well beyond the line of social acceptability. If you join a local football club, and you are a member of that football club and you go and play football and you engage in a particular type of slur, that club will have a code that says if you engage in those types of slurs towards other members of the club, you're still legally able to do it, but we're going to disassociate ourselves and remove ourselves from the situation. There are, of course, codes of practice with the media, whether it be television, print or radio, that all say what they are prepared to broadcast at certain times of the day. So it's actually not as straightforward as whether you've got a provision around in the Constitution or not. It's a full spectrum of issues, but in the end, you're free to say what you want unless it causes explicit harm to somebody else.
And so it gets in the idea of offence, and we'll quickly cover, which is well, a political issue that's been bouncing around for a while, is the 18C issue, which is the
around the Racial Discrimination Act. But the point about offence is that offence is never the basis to limit what somebody can say. It doesn't matter how much you don't like something somebody says if just because you're offended. I mean, people get offended by things all the time. And you take it for
It's Twitter.
Well, it's Twitter, but it's at universities they teach subjects on cross-cultural communication explicitly to educate people about how not to cause offence. People can be offended by particular words that may have a meaning to them, and but not have a meaning to somebody else. People can imply or take offence deliberately. So offence is a very bad standard or test because it's also subjective. It's based on somebody's individual experience. There may be something that you could say that might relate to my life experience about, my grandmother dying or something like that. You're not even remotely familiar with it. And on that basis, I could be offended.
Yep.
That isn't a basis to force you into silence and censor your opinion.
That brings me to the comment that I think George Brander said, people have a right to be bigots. I suspect that wasn't literal, like, the customer's always right. It's not a literal saying, right? But it's just basically saying people should be allowed to have ideas and thoughts that are outside of what the accepted public view is at that time. Would that be where he's going with that? And with this would be against religions?
Well, it's technically not right to say people have a right to be a bigot. People have a right to freedom of speech. It's the exercise of that right, which is what we call freedom. So if you were to be technically accurate, you would say people have the freedom to be bigoted, which is true. You have an unlimited right to your own thoughts, and people have bigoted thoughts all the time, even people who don't consider themselves to be bigoted, just because you think about things or your mind jumps to certain places. It's only the extent to which you then express them that there are some limits. So if you express a bigoted view with the intention of causing violence, then there's restricted. But if you just express an opinion which may have bigoted connotations, that's a very different thing. And people do that through stereotyping all the time. Even unintentionally they do that. So that's where it's going. That's where I think the spirit of the comment was going. But it's fundamentally accurate. People do have that freedom to hold controversial opinions, and that's a good thing. I mean, I keep trying to point out to people, if you set the standard of the freedom of speech based on where something was offensive in the past, and you weren't able to cross the line of social acceptability, the women's liberation movement would never have occurred because it challenged people directly in positions of power and authority over what they considered at the time to be offensive ideas. Gay liberation wouldn't have happened. This is why we need to keep debate open, to keep discussion going and keep society and human progress continuing.
Now, since you're a big gamer, I probably should ask about the banning of, or not so much anymore with time, but since you love games.
I'm an aspirational gamer, how about that?
I like that term. GTA 5, now that was banned from Target from a consumer backlash. Now, what's your thoughts on that? I mean, when people petition a retailer to get rid of a game because they think it's too violent.
Well, I mean, I think it's a fraught exercise, to be quite frank. I mean, people are welcome to protest against companies. That's an entirely legitimate thing to do. But in something in the space of technology, it's just a waste of time, in my opinion, because technology is so significantly undermining people's capacity to do it. So Target doesn't stock Grand Theft Auto. Okay, well, I'm sure EB Games continues to, and lots of other companies, least of all that you can get it from the internet or anywhere else. So the idea that having a consumer backlash is somehow going to stop a particular type of behaviour unless you get the grandparent company to stop stocking it is a nice exercise to make people feel like they're expressing their concern but won't actually deliver the outcome they want. Especially when, what was the actual basis of it? I understand that the content of it, the video game is, I would find, offensive, disgraceful, misogynistic, all of those sorts of things. But
the petition itself?
So, but no, the petition is entirely. What was the actual petition?
Well,
about?
The petition said that you could be rewarded. Effectively, was worded you'd be rewarded for killing prostitutes in the game, which was factually incorrect because you didn't actually get rewarded. You actually got arrested, unless you consider that reward. And you don't just kill prostitutes; you can kill anybody. So it's not a particularly. That's not a task you have to do at any point. So,
that's poor taste. I would never play that game myself. And in the end, the market will decide what people want. But you're never going to achieve the objective of trying to stop the content of the game just by protesting a retailer in an environment where it can be shared through downloading.
Yeah, and other retailers will carry it.
Exactly.
Yeah. Now, I'll probably finish up with you. You're a big gamer, but you don't have enough time to these days.
No, it's terrible. I'm going to admit a deep secret, which is a few years ago, I was sort of deprived of video games as a child. A few years ago, don't tell my partner this, but I bought an Xbox 360, and he basically said that I wasn't allowed to. I was allowed to play it one weekend a year, and so I picked the longest weekend, which was Easter. But these days, I don't really have a time to play it anymore. So
your favourites from the past?
Well, I mean,
Wolfenstein.
I love
like
Wolfenstein. I was a big Doom, big Quake. We used to, I know it was pathetic, used to have LAN parties when I was in high school. And
that's awesome.
used to do a lot of that, but even more recently, a big Call of Duty fan. When it comes down to it, my deep, dark, enjoyment is to, turn the lights off, crank up the sound, and go around and basically shoot terrorists. I'll confess.
That's cool. Oh, there you go. Another big gamers are everywhere.
That's right. It never happens though, I have to confess, but it's an aspiration.
But games are an escape. Gamers are a chance to do things you don't get to do in real life. So you get to drive cars you don't get to in real life. You get to kill people. It's not really what you do in real life, but in games.
Well, the assumption is that they're already terrorists and you're in a war zone, so I think it's okay. But equally, I'm a bit of a tragic fan for the classics like Super Mario and those sorts of things, because that is just fun and test you.
That's cool. That's good. Look, gamers everywhere. How about that? Cool. Well, thank you very much for your time. We really appreciate it.
Pleasure.
And thank you for that. And we'll hopefully talk to you again in the future.
Love to.
Thank you.
Take care.
Oh, shake hands.
Oh.
Washing in the 21st century, doing something clean to it, washing harder than anybody you ever seen do it. Steams from the sprayers, got a nice feel to it. I guess every shower needs its theme music. Just a kid with my dad in the shower. Get the loofah and we start to scour. Start slipping, I'm slipping and I cower. The faucet's broken, the school is closed, the gym is open. We ain't got nothing to lose, with my dad I'm scrubbing. Huh, dad and me we scrubbing, with some light-skinned dads and some straight-up golden. In this tiled world with my dad I'm hosing. Water's too hot, I think I'll dip my toes in. Huh, I think I'll dip my toes in. Way too many dads, I need a moment. No one dad should hug all that shower. Get the loofah and we start to scour. Start slipping, I'm slipping and I cower. Look up, the dad isn't ours.
Sorry, what?
What is Steam Greenlight doing? I don't understand. All these games are coming out on Steam now, and it's just flooding the store.
It's virtualizing all of our life experiences, whether we're flying a plane or driving a bus or a truck or having a shower with our dad or being a goat. We have very much, we've crossed the threshold with these simulators, haven't we?
I think there's too many simulators that all these joke simulators are just getting too far, and it's like,
Let me challenge your theory. I'm going to present to you a series of simulators and you tell me if they're real or fake.
Okay.
Mining and tunneling simulator.
Real?
Yes. Airport firefighter simulator.
Fake.
Real. Bungee jumping simulator.
Fake.
Real. Ninja scooter simulator.
Has to be fake.
Real. Yo-Yo Mars yo-yo simulator.
I'm just going to say yes, it's real.
Unfortunately, it is fake. Unfortunately.
Now, Resident Evil is obviously a long and storied franchise, and one that we've both played a lot of. The newest release, of course, is Resident Evil Revelations 2, and it's is it different? I guess it technically is different. So the previous one had a television-style feel to it, whereas this one has literally gone for episodes.
Yes, I think the format actually works really well. So it's the latest episodic survival horror shooter from Capcom. You know the deal by now. By a terrorist kind of plaguing. But this time, we're actually imprisoned off an island off the coast of Russia.
Yeah. So it follows the story of Claire Redfield, like old stalwart, and Barry Burton. So like one end characters from 1 and 2 recurring. And the interesting thing is the stories are actually set 6 months apart.
Yes.
Which really works from a narrative element. You see what happened, what caused Barry to then do the. So I think it's a really interesting take on the story, and I find it less schlocky, I guess, than some of the previous entries.
As with every Resident Evil, you're eventually going to get to the lab segment, and everything kind of gets B-movie from there. But that's part of the charm of Resident Evil. It isn't Resident Evil without that kind of stuff. But with that being said, I really like how the environments kind of tell the tale of you know, because previously, you know how Claire and Moira Burton, which is the daughter of Barry Burton, they're the one that goes through the first sequence, and then Barry quickly follows after. And it's interesting to see the changes in the environment of how when they've come past and the different enemies that kind of transpire and like run after you. So it works really well in that regard, and especially the episodic structure.
And also the gameplay style. It takes a lot of the best elements of the original Revelations. Number 6, and number 6 wasn't that bad.
Yes,
but whatever.
It takes the best of what made 6 fantastic. It's like they went into a meeting that said, okay, so 6 was great, story not so much. Let's meld that with a bit of survival horror as well, because as we all know, Revelations was a bit of a throwback to the whole survival horror genre.
And The Last of Us as well. Like there's elements of The Last of Us.
A lot of crafting.
So there's a lot of stuff mixed in. But I think the big thing as well is the episodic. We have to go back to the episodic price point. It is not a full price title. It is not even close to a full price title. You actually
pay a lot less for Revelations 2 than you did with the original Revelations.
Correct. And so and you can dip your toe into it for a certain amount, and then if you were to buy the rest, it's still not that much more than if you bought them all at the start. To me, I think that's exactly how episodic content should be. If you're going to do a season pass, make it a goddamn season. I think one of the few things that did it well, and perhaps didn't implement it great, was Halo 4. But in this, I think they've just nailed it, and they've nailed the concept of here is this certain amount of gameplay. You're probably going to get 20 hours out of it if you keep replaying it. It's the money that you paid.
It's hilarious considering Capcom was once the laughing stock for DLC. So they've nailed it this time around. I have no issues with it whatsoever. Fantastic series. You know, even if it does get a little bit schlocky at times, there's a lot more bang for your buck if you're worried about that kind of thing. I mean, after the campaign, there's raid mode. You can go through the campaign in invisible mode where all enemies are invisible. There's so much value for what you're getting right now. I couldn't recommend it enough.
I 100% agreed. It's probably one of the best Resident Evil games to come along in a long time.
So Tim, have you had much experience with the Resident Evil franchise?
Well, I think I came in at 5. I've played 4 as well, but obviously heavy co-op focused games, and I don't think I've ever really gone back to play the originals.
Never been tempted to revisit history with those original classics?
No, not really.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you on that one actually. I admire those games for what they did to the horror genre, for developing the Resident Evil brand into what it is nowadays. But that's all I can really do, just admire them. Because even with the shiny, slicked up graphics and controls in the recent re-release of Resident Evil HD,
you're still going back to like tank controls and like very big pixels.
and just the sort of game mechanics from those days, which again, I can sort of admire from a distance, like I would a piece of art.
Yeah.
There's not even any co-op. Although it should be mentioned that Resident Evil Revelations 2 does have split screen co-op.
And that's a really good thing. Like, a lot of games nowadays don't have the split screen, and surely it can't be too hard to just add it. It's just like having horizontal or vertical.
I mean, everyone plays on the internet nowadays.
Yeah.
Although, by the way, are you team horizontal split screen or team vertical split screen?
I don't know. Like, I play a lot of horizontal split screen with like the old Wipeout and RE5, but with widescreen, it's like you seem to get more in vertical. It depends on the game.
Vertical is dumb. I'm always team horizontal split screen. I'm team horizontal, I'm team Jacob, and I am team not inverted. Thank you very much.
Yep. Dirty inverts. Oh, I don't know how they do it.
No shout outs to them. However, there are shout outs to the recent Square Sounds Music Festival. So any of you that attended and appreciated all the cool chip tunes, send a link on our Facebook and just tell us what your thoughts on it were.
Yeah, it was a great event. So next week we've got Final Fantasy Type 0 coming up.
Oh, you mean Final Fantasy 15 featuring some other something?
Yes.
Yeah.
But that's it for this week.
Yes.
So we better wrap it up. Visit our website, www.newgameplus.tv.
Like us on Facebook, New Game Plus TV.
Follow our Twitter and Instagram at New Game Plus TV.
And watch us on YouTube and Twitch, also New Game Plus TV.
Thank you, Donald, for joining me.
Thank you, Tim.
And we'll see you guys next week.